In the heart of Silicon Valley, where glass towers shimmer with billion-dollar dreams, there was a man no one truly saw. He moved quietly through polished hallways, pushing a cart filled with mops and trash bags. To executives in tailored suits, he was invisible, just the maintenance guy. But behind his calm eyes lived a different truth, the mind of an engineer, the soul of a dreamer, and the legacy of a grandfather who taught him to listen to the heartbeat of machines. His name was Jamal Washington. Across from him stood Victoria Sterling, a powerful CEO known for her sharp heels and sharper words. She ruled through fear, her empire built on control and intimidation. To her, Jamal was nothing more than a shadow, someone to mock, someone to dismiss. Until the day desperation forced her to gamble everything on humiliation. Before hundreds of employees and foreign investors, she sneered at him with a challenge designed to destroy. Fix this engine what Mitt and Harvard couldn't, and maybe you'll prove you belong. Fail, and you'll never set foot in this company again. What happened next wasn't just about an engine. It was about dignity, about justice, about what happens when the underestimated finally get their chance to be heard. Sometimes the deepest wounds are not carved by violence, but by silence, by the quiet way someone looks through you as if you don't exist. That was Jamal Washington's everyday reality. To the executives who rushed past him in their polished leather shoes, he was invisible. He pushed his cart down the shining marble floors of Tech Vanguard, emptying bins, refilling water pitchers, and making sure conference rooms smelled of lemon cleaner before the next big meeting. On paper, his title was Technical Consultant, a label meant to soften the truth. In practice, everyone knew he was just the janitor. And yet, Jamal carried within him a gift that no job description could ever capture. He had the hands of an engineer, the mind of a problem solver, and the patience of a man who had learned to survive disappointment. His framed associate's degree in mechanical engineering hung in his tiny apartment like a relic of a dream deferred. Life had not been kind to him: medical bills, family obligations, doors slammed shut by universities that asked for tuition he couldn't pay. Every day, he carried the weight of being underestimated, the quiet sting of knowing people saw only what they wanted to see. Being overlooked is something many of us can relate to. Maybe you've been in a meeting where your ideas were ignored, only to hear them repeated later by someone else who was instantly praised. Maybe you've worked harder than anyone in the room but still found yourself treated as less because of your background, your accent, or simply the way you look. Jamal's story, though dramatic, is not unique. It echoes a truth that runs through workplaces across the world. Talent can be buried under prejudice, and dignity can be chipped away not by loud insults but by daily disregard. Jamal endured small humiliations like scars that never heal. He remembered the day he was cleaning the boardroom during an investor call. Victoria Sterling, the CEO, gestured at him like an exhibit and told her guests, "We believe in giving opportunities to everyone, even our maintenance staff." Her words dripped with mock charity. The investors chuckled politely, never realizing the man she used as a prop had spent countless nights reading engineering journals, teaching himself advanced diagnostics, and studying the very blueprints scattered on that same table. Imagine standing in a room filled with brilliant minds and knowing, deep down, you might hold a piece of the solution they are missing, but your voice is never invited, your presence barely tolerated. What makes this kind of discrimination so damaging is not just the insult itself, but the erosion of self-worth it creates over time. When you are told again and again, directly or indirectly, that you don't belong, the risk is that you start believing it. You shrink yourself to survive. You choose invisibility because speaking up only makes you a target. Jamal had mastered this survival strategy, keeping his head down, pretending not to hear, walking past cruel laughter with his dignity folded into silence. But silence, though it protects, can also weigh heavily on the soul. In everyday life, many people carry similar burdens. A young woman who studied computer science may find herself asked to take notes in meetings rather than lead projects. A man with an accent may be overlooked for promotion because someone assumes his communication isn't polished enough. These are not always written down as policies, but they shape careers and lives as much as any rule in the handbook. They are the unwritten codes of exclusion. And in Jamal's story, those codes would soon be tested in the most public and dramatic way possible. Yet even in the shadows, resilience takes root. Jamal's resilience came from his grandfather, Samuel, who once told him, "Engines don't care about your skin color, boy. They only care if you respect them enough to listen." Those words became his anchor. He may have been treated as invisible at work, but in his small apartment, surrounded by salvaged engine parts, he was alive. He listened to machines as if they spoke a language only he understood. Where others heard random noise, Jamal heard rhythm. Where others saw broken metal, he saw potential. It was in these quiet, private moments that he refused to let prejudice define him. And here lies the small lesson we can carry. Being overlooked does not erase your worth. Recognition from others may come late, or not at all, but the skills you nurture, the passions you protect, are still yours. They cannot be stolen by ignorance. Like Jamal, we each hold gifts that may not be visible to those blinded by prejudice. The challenge is to keep those gifts alive until the right moment arrives. That moment, for Jamal, was approaching faster than he knew. The company he worked for was standing on the edge of collapse. A broken engine worth millions had resisted every attempt at repair. Ivy League engineers had given up. Investors were losing patience. And soon, the same boardroom where he had been mocked would become the stage where his silence ended and his voice finally broke through. At the heart of tech, Vanguard stood a machine that symbolized both promise and pressure. It was more than an engine. It was the company's crown jewel, the product that had consumed years of labor and millions of dollars in research. Engineers whispered about it with reverence. An AI-integrated powertrain capable of running delivery trucks with efficiency levels that could revolutionize logistics. For investors, it was a ticket to dominance. For executives, it was a symbol of prestige. But for Jamal, it was something else entirely. It was a voice calling out in distress, a rhythm that didn't match, a song out of tune. For 6 weeks, that engine had been the center of chaos. Meetings dragged on for hours. Engineers in crisp suits and polished shoes typed furiously at laptops, running simulation after simulation. They patched software, swapped hardware, and recalibrated sensors. Yet every attempt ended the same way. The engine roared to life, ran for exactly 14 minutes and 37 seconds, and then sputtered into failure with the same haunting error message, "Harmonic disruption detected." The problem was both technical and symbolic. How could the brightest minds in the industry fail to fix what was supposed to be the pinnacle of innovation? Victoria Sterling turned the crisis into theater. She paced across the boardroom like a conductor without an orchestra, barking orders, pointing fingers. She demanded solutions, but what she really wanted was someone to blame. The tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. Ivy League graduates, who once wore their alma mater's name like armor, now shrank under her glare. Her sharp heels echoed like a metronome of fear, reminding everyone that their jobs and reputations were on the line. What often gets overlooked in stories of corporate innovation is the human cost of relentless pressure. Behind every failed test were young engineers who hadn't slept in days, who carried mountains of student debt, and who feared the shame of admitting defeat. Failure in that room didn't just threaten a product, it threatened identities. And when identities are fragile, blame becomes a weapon. It was easier for Victoria to hint that the janitor in the corner was dragging the company down than to admit her prized team had no answers. For Jamal, standing silently in those rooms as he replaced water pitchers or emptied trash, the irony was sharp. He knew what failure looked like, not in terms of money, but in terms of lives. He had seen his mother's strength chipped away by chemotherapy treatments they couldn't fully afford. He had witnessed his grandfather fight for respect in Detroit garages where men dismissed him because of his skin, only to beg for his help when their machines failed. Compared to those battles, this crisis was just another broken system waiting for someone to listen. There is a lesson here. When systems break, people often look outward for complicated answers, forgetting that the truth may lie in something simple, something overlooked. The engineers searched their code and ran complex diagnostics, but none of them stopped to ask, what if the problem wasn't in the software at all? That question lingered like an echo only Jamal could hear. And as the engine crisis deepened, the stage was being set for a confrontation far larger than technology. This wasn't just about mechanics. It was about who had the right to be heard, whose expertise was considered valid, and whether prejudice could silence truth even when millions of dollars were at stake. The weight of broken promises hung heavy in the air. Promises to investors, promises to employees, promises to the world that tech vanguard was ready to lead the future. And soon, the man everyone overlooked would be the only one with the courage to challenge that silence. Every organization has its secrets, and tech vanguards were written in emails, whispered in corridors, and etched into the smirks of those who thought themselves superior. Jamal had long learned to navigate this terrain. He wasn't just ignored, he was mocked. The cruelest words didn't always come from Victoria. They came from those who smiled in his face and ridiculed him behind his back. He discovered emails referring to him as the cleaning guy, jokes about whether he could even read the company directory. Human resources staff joined in the cruelty, sending laughing emojis as if mocking him was part of the corporate culture. These weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a system that normalized disrespect. When prejudice becomes casual, it becomes dangerous. It seeps into decisions, into who gets promotions, into whose voices are heard. This culture of disrespect revealed a painful truth. In workplaces across the world, diversity often exists only on paper. Companies boast about inclusivity, but behind closed doors, people of color find themselves tokenized, marginalized, or outright dismissed. Jamal lived this every day, and yet he carried on with quiet dignity, choosing resilience over retaliation. But disrespect has a way of building pressure, just like a machine pushed beyond its tolerance. It simmers beneath the surface until the smallest spark can set it ablaze. For Jamal, that spark was about to arrive, because disrespect, when exposed to the light, loses its power. And the very people who laughed at him would soon find their laughter replaced by silence. When Jamal was 12, his world was shaped by the steady rhythm of engines in his grandfather Samuel's garage. It was more than a place of repair. It was a sanctuary of wisdom. Samuel had broken barriers at Ford, becoming one of the first black foremen in an era when respect had to be earned twice over. He taught Jamal not just mechanics, but philosophy. Engines don't lie, people do. The boy learned to listen, to place his small hands on steel blocks and feel vibrations like a heartbeat. He learned that every sound, every smell, every vibration carried meaning. These weren't lessons from textbooks. They were lessons from survival. Samuel told him, "They'll doubt you, boy, twice as hard, every time. But machines don't care what you look like. Fix what they couldn't, and suddenly your color doesn't matter." Those words shaped Jamal's life. They were a reminder that even when society closed doors, skill could open them again. And though Samuel passed before Jamal could reach his full potential, his legacy remained alive in every problem Jamal solved. In Detroit, resilience was not optional, it was the only way forward. That legacy was about to collide with Silicon Valley arrogance in ways no one expected. 200 employees crowded into the main auditorium, their faces pale with fatigue, worry, and unspoken fear. The broken engine had already cost the company weeks of lost time and millions in confidence. Now, with the German investors seated in the front row like silent judges, the tension was unbearable. Victoria Sterling stood at the podium, tall, confident, and utterly ruthless. Her voice carried across the room like the crack of a whip. "We face our greatest challenge. This engine must run, or this company falls." She paused deliberately, scanning the audience as if selecting prey. "Effective immediately," she continued. "Non-essential staff will be terminated. We cannot afford dead weight." Her eyes locked on Jamal, who stood quietly near the back, holding his cleaning cart like a shield. In that moment, every humiliation he had endured, the whispers, the jokes, the casual disregard boiled inside him. He could remain silent, as he always had, or he could finally speak. Jamal felt his grandfather's words echo in his memory. "Engines don't lie, boy. People do." His hand trembled slightly, but he raised it. A hush fell over the room. 200 heads turned, as if pulled by the same invisible string. "Ma'am," he said, his voice steady though his heart pounded, "I believe the problem isn't in the software integration. It's in the harmonic frequency calibration." The words hung in the air like forbidden music. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then nervous laughter rippled across the rows. Executives exchanged incredulous glances. The janitor had dared to challenge the empire. Victoria's face shifted from shock to fury, then to something sharper, a cruel idea forming. "Well, well," she purred into the microphone. Our maintenance consultant thinks he's an engineer. How entertaining. Her red heels clicked as she stepped down from the podium. She moved closer to Jamal, ensuring every eye in the room remained fixed on him. Since you're so confident, here's your chance. Fix the engine in 2 hours, in front of everyone, our employees, our board, our investors. Succeed, and I'll make you a senior engineering consultant. Fail, and you will be escorted out and blacklisted from Silicon Valley, forever. Gasps filled the auditorium. A challenge this public was brutal, humiliating, and clearly designed for him to fail. Yet Jamal's eyes did not waver. He nodded once, a simple gesture of acceptance. The German investors leaned forward, intrigued. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the legendary engineer, rose to her feet. "I will witness this test," she declared, her voice carrying authority honed over decades. "If it is to be fair, it must be properly observed." The room shifted. What began as corporate theater suddenly became history in the making. Victoria's smug smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but she recovered quickly. "Fine," she said, her voice sharp. "Let's give the world a show." She gestured to the cameras mounted on the walls. "Stream it live. Let everyone see what happens when unqualified people pretend to know better than experts." Oh. And just like that, Jamal was no longer a shadow in the back of the room. He was the center of the storm, standing on the edge of humiliation or triumph. The lesson here is simple. Moments of injustice can also become opportunities. Sometimes, when you are cornered, courage is the only path forward. And Jamal had chosen courage. The boardroom had been transformed into an arena. The engine, gleaming with chrome and steel, sat on the conference table like a mechanical judge. Cameras captured every angle. Employees pressed against glass walls, their faces tense, phones ready to record history or disaster. Jamal walked toward the machine, each step heavy with the weight of 200 skeptical eyes. Victoria stood near the windows, arms folded, her expression predatory. She whispered loudly enough for microphones to catch. 2 hours, that's all. Then the world will watch him fail. Laughter trickled from a few executives, but others shifted uncomfortably. The cruelty was too obvious now. Jamal placed his calloused hands gently on the engine block, closing his eyes. He listened, not with tools, not with code, but with instinct. The low hum beneath the surface reminded him of Detroit garages, of long afternoons with his grandfather explaining that every engine had a heartbeat. Around him, engineers smirked. To them, it looked like superstition. To Jamal, it was science lived through touch, sound, and memory. He opened his eyes and spoke clearly. This engine was built in Germany with metric specifications, but the AI calibration software here in California uses imperial measurements. The difference is small fractions of millimeters, but it creates resonance errors. He pointed at the diagnostic screens. At around 2,800 revolutions per minute, the system fights itself. That's why it always shuts down at the same time. Murmurs filled the room. Some engineers shook their heads in disbelief. Others frowned, connecting dots they hadn't considered. "Doctor." Rodriguez leaned forward, scribbling notes. "Continue," she urged. Jamal traced the blueprint spread across the table. The crankshaft here manufactured at 87.63 millimeters. The AI expects 3.450 inches, which converts imperfectly. The tolerance mismatch causes harmonic disruption. The engine isn't broken, it's confused. His calm explanations chipped away at skepticism. For the first time, people began to listen. But time ticked relentlessly. Security guards stood at the doors, ready to escort him out. Victoria smirked, convinced he would trip over his own words. Yet Jamal pressed on, unshaken. This was more than an engine. It was a chance to prove that dignity mattered as much as degrees. The trial by fire had begun, and every second burned. The lesson, when you face a wall of doubt, trust the wisdom you've carried all along. Sometimes survival itself is the training ground for greatness. The engine's failure had baffled experts for 6 weeks. Jamal offered his solution in less than 2 hours. He rummaged through spare parts until he found a small metal disc, a harmonic damper. To most, it looked insignificant, almost laughable compared to the millions already spent. But Jamal's confidence gave it weight. He held it up for all to see. "This isn't magic, it's harmony. The AI and the engine are speaking 2 different languages. This damper is the translator." Victoria scoffed. "A $50 part? That's your answer?" Jamal met her gaze. Sometimes the simplest fixes are the most powerful. He installed the damper with practiced ease. His hands moved with precision, guided by years of rebuilding engines in basements, garages, and workshops far from Silicon Valley. Employees who had once ignored him now leaned closer, captivated. Dr. Rodriguez observed every movement, nodding with respect. The moment of truth arrived. Jamal turned the key. The engine roared to life, its hum smoother, steadier. Seconds stretched into minutes, 10 minutes, 14 minutes. At 14:37, the point where it always failed, the machine kept running. Perfectly. Diagnostic screens lit up with green indicators. Efficiency reached 97.3% higher than theoretical maximums. The boardroom erupted. Engineers gasped. Investors whispered urgently in German, astonished. Employees clapped spontaneously, their doubts dissolving into awe. For Jamal, the sound was more than applause, it was vindication. He had spoken the engine's language, and it had answered. The lesson here: brilliance is not always loud or recognized immediately. Sometimes it lives quietly, waiting for the right moment. And when it finally speaks, the world cannot ignore it. Triumph quickly gave way to consequences. Dr. Rodriguez announced her findings. This solution is elegant, cost-effective, and scientifically sound. Jamal Washington has done what 6 weeks of experts could not. Her voice carried weight beyond debate. Klaus Mueller shook Jamal's hand firmly. We will increase our investment by 20% on one condition. He must lead the European engine program. Gasps filled the room. Promotion offers of such magnitude were unheard of. Jamal, the janitor mocked for years, was now the future of the company. Meanwhile, Victoria's empire began to crumble. Journalists watching the live stream flooded social media. Hashtags like #EngineeringJustice and #ListenToTalent trended worldwide. The emails mocking Jamal surfaced. HR's complicity became public knowledge. The board had no choice but to act. Victoria was demoted, stripped of authority. HR leaders faced investigations. Policies were rewritten to ensure no voice, no matter how humble, could be dismissed without review. The very system that had crushed Jamal was forced to reform because of him. The reckoning was not just for Victoria, but for an entire culture built on prejudice. The lesson: injustice may hide for a time, but truth, once exposed, demands accountability. Months passed. Jamal no longer pushed carts down hallways. Instead, he stood at the helm of engineering teams spanning continents. In Germany, in California, in Detroit, his methods reshaped the way engines were designed and tested. Students studied his case in universities. Young black engineers wrote to him, saying his story gave them hope. But Jamal remained grounded. In his office, he kept 2 frames side by side, his community college diploma and the patent bearing his name. They told the story of a man once overlooked, now celebrated. Yet he never forgot the silence of those nights when he studied alone, when no one believed in him but himself. Tech Vanguard thrived under new policies. Recruitment soared. Employee morale improved. The company became known not just for its technology, but for its commitment to recognizing hidden talent. Jamal's transformation symbolized more than personal success. It was proof that systems could change when courage meets opportunity. The lesson: true transformation is not about revenge. It is about using triumph to build bridges, to open doors for others, and to leave no one unseen. It was in the cafeteria, months later, that Victoria finally approached Jamal. Her designer suits had been replaced with more modest attire. The sharpness in her eyes had softened. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly, "and I'd like your guidance on becoming a better leader." Jamal looked at her for a long moment. He thought of his grandfather, of Detroit, of nights spent cleaning floors while dreams felt far away. Then he replied with quiet grace, "Engines and people are not so different. Both need respect. Both need someone to truly listen." Victoria nodded, humbled. The lesson had been costly, but it was real. Justice had not destroyed her. It had forced her to grow. For Jamal, the journey had come full circle. From invisible janitor to global leader, from mocked outsider to symbol of resilience, his story reminded the world that dignity cannot be erased. Talent cannot be silenced, and prejudice, no matter how powerful, cannot withstand the truth forever. Justice always finds a way through persistence, through courage, through the unshakable belief that being overlooked does not mean being unworthy. For everyone listening, let this story be a call to honor your gifts, to speak your truth, and to never stop believing that your moment will come. And so, Jamal's story closes not just as a tale of one man against the odds, but as a reminder to all of us. Injustice can silence a voice, but it cannot erase truth. Prejudice may delay recognition, but it cannot extinguish talent. What matters is the courage to keep going, to hold on to the gifts inside us until the world is finally ready to see. As you step away from this story, think about the people around you who may be overlooked, the quiet colleague, the neighbor, even yourself. Remember, dignity is not given by others, it is carried within. And when the right moment comes, justice always finds a way. If this story touched you, I invite you to join our community here at NorahStories. Click like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you'll never miss the next story of resilience, truth, and the fight for justice. Together, we can keep these voices alive and keep the light of fairness shining where it's needed most.